maybe 2 months now or something like that. Just wanted to change it up, see what was going on in Europe. Yeah, so I don't know. I was in San Francisco for eight, maybe 8 years or something like that. Um, yeah, just I don't know, wanted to try something new. So yeah, we'll be looking at this. We have the Houdini interface in Portuguese. I feel like that would confuse more of you guys than anything else. I did turn my phone to the Portuguese language settings and stuff like that, but yeah, if I start name all the node names in Portuguese and stuff like that. So yeah, we left off. I did just upload the previous one to YouTube. So this has the scene file from I don't know. It has the timestamp or whatever. But yeah, this will have the scene file in the description from where we left off last time. Um, and then I just did some tweaks on my own render settings and stuff like that. And this is kind of where I ended up. Um, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some differences. Like, so I think we can make these a little bit bigger while we examine them. Um, yeah, so there's some different things I ended up doing a little bit just with the color and stuff like that. Could like reverse this, play it backwards, and maybe they feel a little bit more similar that way, just in terms of camera movement and motion and stuff like that. But yeah, I ended up doing some things we'll go over in a little bit. Mainly, a lot of it was like render time optimizations. So I pretty much excluded like all of these glints from receiving reflections or being able to see other objects um, in the reflectivity or anything like that. And then the light, I made a separate light to kind of accentuate them or like get these highlights basically. And I turned off shadows for that light completely. So like I just found too much kind of like ray tracing calculations and things like that were slowing down the render too much. And I think with this one, I just did a frame here to double check, but this is just like 3 minutes for a frame. I think these are, I'm doing like half of this resolution. So HD, I just overwrote it on the ROP to do half the scale. So it's like a HD frame in like 3 minutes with just this RTX 8000. But I think the RTX 8000 is similar speed in Redshift to maybe 3080 or something like that. So that was mainly my render time optimizations. Yeah, I think I did do a little bit of tricks to get some more detail and stuff like that in the center that we can go over. Using the rest position and the coordinates and stuff like that we did. Yeah, I think my scale is definitely a little bit different. I feel like theirs might be flattened out quite a bit in Z, and it's almost like a galaxy, like Milky Way or something like that you're looking from above. But this was my basic setup here. We'll just get this here for a second. All right, so I was doing a dolly zoom or like a Hitchcock type of thing with this camera. So we turn off the particle caches and just play the scene. We could get these both going in the same direction. So the camera's doing this kind of motion right here, but the field of view and things like that are changing as this goes. I think if we do the Z, I don't know, maybe you get into there. Z. This should show like the focal plane. I'm trying to see if we can get the, there it is. All right. So as this camera's moving, I did some rotation, but then the field of view, the glitter bombs, I didn't see these. We could take a look. So the later, oh, these are the sifter that you throw it up in the air? I never saw these yet. But yeah, it definitely has some of that more crunchy feeling, a bit like these. It's pretty cool. And I think some of these later ones get even more sparkly or glittery. Some of these, I feel like they're a little bit different from each one, but some of these were getting a lot more sparkly and things like that. This one I feel like was the flattest one of their sequence or whatever. Nick X, thank you for the Prime subscription. And thank you as well, Potassioid. Sorry I missed you at the start. But yeah, so this is doing like a dolly zoom and a rotation. So basically, even though this camera is moving in depth, if we look through the frame of it, the orb appears the same size, if that makes sense. So if we loop this, you can see the aperture, like that kind of stuff is changing. But if I leave my mouse pointer here on like the edge of it, it's not going to change very much. Because it's lifted up like a little bit from the origin or from where my camera's targeting, it doesn't visually change that much. And I did an example like that on my Patreon. I don't know if I might need to log in or something. I think it was under camera or something, cinematography. But yeah, that's the basic idea of it. We might be able to go, this is the kind of effect here. So yeah, as this camera's going, this kind of stuff is happening. So basically, this gives you the effect that the background is kind of getting closer to you, even though like visually this orb is staying the same size. So I don't know, I felt like it just kind of helped this. We had like a spiral, yes, the vertigo or Hitchcock effect. I think in the first Jaws, they have a shot as well with it, dolly zoom or whatever, like. So yeah, and then I just felt like with the spiral, things rotating, glinting, flickering, it kind of helped just make things even more like mysterious or psychedelic or whatever. I don't know if they really put that in. I feel like they did some compositing tweaks for sure. There's definitely a little bit of like a pull back or zoom out, but I don't think they did as an extreme. This is just part of the shot here. So I actually let the render go quite a bit. So at its most extreme at the end, it gets pretty distorted or pretty warbly, kind of like here. But yeah, I just grabbed a portion of the render that looks pretty cool. So that's a basic overview. We dig into the file a little bit now, and eventually I'll do a share or a scene share of it. I'm gonna comment some things as we go through it, so that's why I'm holding off to do it for right now. But yeah, so we have the camera. I'm not gonna go into that right now. Could save it for later. I'll just talk about the lighting at first. So this is pretty much same framework we set up everything as last time. I do have two lights here. One is this orb light, and then the other one is a red light. Um, the red light I was trying to just give so much of this like red, vibrant saturation. So I think we can see it a little bit here. We can go through and solo some of these lights if that helps, but my GPU is gonna struggle when we do it, because it's just that I only have one GPU at the moment right now. So we'll just take a look. Turn off the flake light, turn off these ambient lights, and just isolate or solo the red light right here. I'm gonna get rid of the bucketed render. So this is just what that red light is doing. That's all it's contributing. I was kind of using these lights almost more like painting. Like they're not very realistic or physically motivated or anything like that. Good to see you, Emporio Render. So yeah, this is what the red light's doing. And then this orb one here, this is that like high intensity, just focal point middle of the frame, super shiny one. So we'll see it pop on in a little bit. And yeah, so this one, just using the size, I put it right behind. I don't know if there's a good way. Maybe we do bounding box. So I put it right behind the orb, basically. So we just have this glowing thing immediately behind it, hidden or occluded by the orb. And then that's giving us like a good amount of glow and showing off a good amount of detail right there. So that's just going on for the main portion of things. Right here we have the red that's kind of giving you a nice like centralized saturation, and then the orb light that's giving you a lot of like the detail and highlights and things like that. And then these ambient ones, I can turn them on. These were just at the left and right side of the frame to give a little bit more interest or just like color variation and stuff like that. So right here, just a hint of shaping and stuff like that. I didn't want it to detract too much. Like just keep the eye in the middle of the frame, but I still wanted to show off a little bit of the particles, because like without that, everything was just super tight, super square. You just lose the detail or even the motion of what's happening out there. So that's all those lights. And then the other one here is this flake light. And I was using these objects and everything I mentioned earlier. I was like optimizing and soloing lights, or like turning on and off reflections. So that was a super important part of optimizing the render, just getting the super like art directed look, I guess. It also helps minimize like flickering or anything like that in your final render. So if you do have like shadows turned on, these might occlude other ones, and then things just get even poppier or even more like dancing or something like that. So flake in this context, I basically instanced a shape here onto a percentage of the particles. Just a basic kind of like a flake of metal. Yeah, like if you scraped some metallic flakes or something like that, like sparkles or anything like that. So yeah, I was just doing a bevel and subdividing. So like just trying to get some interesting looking reflections, and then this same shape is just instanced across a percentage of the particles down here. And they're rotating over time. So this stream, the node stream down here, I'm just grabbing a percentage of the particles. It's like basically saying delete 97% of the particles, and making them start with a random orientation, and over time they're spinning. So this is visualizing the axes or whatever of them. You could turn off color maybe. I don't know, it still might be a little confusing to look at. But just over time, these are slowly tumbling or rotating or stuff like that. And then that's what's giving these the flicker. So the speed of your like rotation, they'll happen to point towards the light at certain times or not. So just look at things in 3D. We have the flake light that's just hitting things from a glancing angle. If you think about this, it's very similar to also just using like a sine wave or animating the intensity of things. Is there an advantage in deleting 97% of a lot of particles? So it gives you a little bit more control because you don't need to keep re-simulating to add more. So I prefer to have more than I need at the start. So that was my theory. If you look at the very first stream, that's where we dialed in the simulation, the very first stream of this series. So on my YouTube, just go here, and one previous to that would be the first stream where I talk quite a bit about the simulation settings. And then in the main particle pass, I'm just deleting 10% of them. So this is keeping basically 90%, and then that's the thicker, more, I don't know what you would call them, maybe like, it's almost volumetric, or like kind of isotropic, like just amorphous, maybe. There's some fancy words I'm pulling out here. But amorphous. So you're basically just trying to make like a general cloud kind of shape, I guess. So amorphous. Isotropic means like non-directional, or like if you have some isotropic volume, it's kind of just like a general gas or something like that. But yeah, the amorphous is just kind of another term or whatever. So the general like gassy looking stuff here, this is 90% of the original particle simulation, and then these flickering ones I just isolate like 10 or 20% or something. So yeah, everything just using the same simulation makes it a little bit easier, because then you're not trying to like match the motion, one's moving differently than the other or anything like that. So I prefer to just do one simulation, strip some parts, use it for one thing, and one other parts and use it for another. Yeah, reuse the geo stream. So it's a little bit more efficient, I guess, or it's just less work overall. Yeah, and then we go over the color. Yeah, I mean, I think some of them might be overlapping. Like I'm just randomly grabbing them. I'm not too careful about like isolating exact. But in certain situations, you might want to manually like make sure you're not overlapping or stacking up particles or anything like that. PhDO Liviera, how's it going? So yeah, that's mainly what's going on, and then both of these shaders are grabbing the color attribute. So in here, I was just doing this redshift color correct. You can kind of either do it on the attribute, you can do it in the shader, or you can do some color corrections as well in the RS post effects. I was doing a little bit in each area. It's just depends on, certain ones are quicker to do. These ones you can do it without like caching or like sending the particles to the renderer again. So if you're really dialing in the look, this is like the most kind of quickest response or whatever. Just recently found your stuff, starting to learn Houdini. Thank you. Yeah, I still am trying to get back in the regular swing of things, but yeah, I'm happy to hear you like my stuff. So that's the particles, flakes, similar, but I did use the color as well for the reflection color, and that was something I didn't do for quite a bit at the start, and I found that once I actually did that step, it really helped make the look a lot better. So these are some crappy older versions. I was like testing some different looks and things like that. Some of them looked too toxic. This is a version here before I added the reflectivity color. And you can see it just like desaturates things a little too much. I just had too many wacky colors going on and things like that. So yeah, just refined it over time. Some of these were pretty interesting, more cosmic. I think these again still didn't have the reflectivity color put in. It's just a little bit more flat, but maybe for a different project, more cosmic or like more photoreal, not as mystical. This type of color grade or something like that could be good for that. So yeah, we're basically reading the color attribute for both those passes, the main particles and the instance flakes. And then I'm gonna clean this up a little bit for you guys. If you want to learn more about this stuff, you can go back to the previous stream. I talked a little bit about this. Basically, this is using VDBs or attributes to extract extra masks or other attributes that you could use to color things. So this is like a curvature. You can use like the gradient of the VDB and different things like that. But I didn't end up using any of it. So I'm just going to get rid of it and make this file a little bit cleaner or a little bit more organized. These are just different ways to color things or visualize stuff. This was another thing we were doing in the initial simulation phase of things. So basically coloring the particles over their lifespan, adding like a glint or trying to do a flicker for like, I don't know, 0.05% of them or something. And then just by their Y position or like their depth or closeness. But again, that wasn't something I used for the final, so I'm just going to clean it up. And we can move the nodes here and keep everything nice and organized. I find that's a tough loop to visually, aesthetically assess something technically complex. You need to step away for a bit to get sufficient distance. Yeah, for sure. I think going through the journey, these previous ones, this was done over like a couple of days, or I don't know, maybe even a week. So yeah, definitely like saving versions, working incrementally. If you're at a studio and you have access to a render farm, you can definitely speed that process up a little bit. But for sure, I think just kind of like, especially if you're exploring things and I don't know, depending how set you are in a certain look you're going for, you're just trying ideas out, like kind of just do a render, see what's working about it, come back, try again with some other stuff, and then kind of need to mix what's working in both of them and find out what's breaking or what isn't. Like some of these, I think there's too much flickering or stuff like that. So like tweaking the rotation speed and just colors and lots of things like that. Just on the past stream, Demon Case, good to see you. I was going to render in Karma. Yeah, Karma could be cool to test this out in. The only thing I'm still trying to figure out about Karma is that their like post effects workflow. We could go back here for a second and just do everything back on here. Did I turn these other lights? Yeah. So the one thing I really like about Redshift is being able to color correct and add photographic elements and things like that directly in the render view without having to like save the image out, go into Nuke or go into another application and mess around. So if we just pop this open right here, we could go through some of the different post effects. So there's like just this color curves. There's like the curves tool in Photoshop, or I think there's like a color lookup node in Nuke that's a similar idea. I'm working in ASUS here, and I feel like sometimes with ASUS I want to give it a little bit more contrast or a little bit more pop, like vibrancy. So I usually do some stuff with the color curves. The photographic exposure stuff is pretty nice. Kind of gives you like some tone mapping or just like overall the exposure, and you can do some saturation or black crushing and stuff like that. And then the bloom, yeah, that's just the overall like glow. I played around with the flare and things like that, but it just wasn't working that well with this setup. So yeah, I think it's just those three that I was using. But you can see here for sure, it helps you get from like just a default kind of render that looks kind of like a render, kind of like a not that good project. But yeah, you can kind of save it, or you can, it's like a lot of flame artists have that skill, or Photoshop artists or like 2D artists can really go in and make something like a render look really good by adding the photographic things. Octane has something similar, I'm pretty sure. I've been looking into Octane. Yeah, I think Houdini, they have Bloom in Houdini in 19. But it's not as, I don't know, the photographic exposure and just having this panel here is super, super useful. It's like having Photoshop inside of your render or whatever. So like working quickly, trying to find a good look, it definitely saves so much time instead of like thinking something's good, saving out the file, bringing it into Photoshop, messing with things. Like it's super slow to work that way. So for doing style frames or like quick look dev, working with a post effects view like this is super nice. We'll go back here. So yeah, this is just the holdout or whatever. And one thing I did do with the orb actually is on the Redshift, you just set it to a matte object. So basically it's just gonna be a holdout essentially. Like if you're used to rendering with holdouts, that's basically what's happening here. It's like a cutout object or whatever. Programmer, so art crits are super difficult for me. I guess having a target reference really helps. I guess, yeah, I think so. Programming like peer reviewing and kind of like art crits, or I don't know, like any kind of dailies review, it's definitely very different goals you're trying to accomplish in terms of if something programmatically like fulfills its task or something looks good. So definitely it takes time to get used to both. All right. So I'm just going to keep cleaning this stuff up a little bit. And one thing I did realize from the previous stream to this stream was doing these retiming nodes. You definitely want to do the stuff we were doing to basically reintegrate time and age and derive a noise based off of that. You want to do that before you retime anything. Because once you change the frame like playback speed, then this stuff won't match your initial birth time. But this is basically what we did last stream. This one's something special. This one's doing the colors. Yeah, and someone asked earlier if it was an advected color pattern or design or whatever, but it's basically we color patterns by rest noise, or like procedural. And there's this ramp here that's being put on top of everything. So just this noise here, doing that. Yeah, at some point I was using a texture map in the previous stream showing that, but ended up not doing things that way, so you can get rid of that. But yeah, we're basically taking the rest position, so the position things were emitted at, and then subtracting age, so the amount of time the particle's been alive, from the current play bar or playback time. So subtracting those two gives you the moment in time that the particle was created or emitted at. And then this one, we were just doing something to glitter, but just doing another like random percentage. So we can get rid of that. So this, we're basically doing the rest position and its birth time. So over time, this allows the particles to stick with their motion or their position, like the noise. Without this, you'll just get a streak, or like nothing will change over time because it's just stuck to its rest position. But then once you add in this fourth component, this allows you to offset the noise pattern over kind of the particle's birth time. And you can change these frequencies here to like squash and stretch it. So you can squish it way down. I just found something like that. Worked pretty well. So in the viewport here with the colors, that kind of stuff, I was just spatially trying to get something similar here where there's like a little bit of pops of maybe blues or greens or things like that throughout, and then predominantly red or orange. So that was my idea here. So yeah, this is color particles by the rest noise. And then the one above that, I was saying this is the special one. So a similar idea, but we're displacing the particle position using a similar noise technique. So again, getting the rest position, getting the birth time by subtracting the two, and then this is using curl noise to make a displacement vector, and this is offsetting the particles procedurally, so you can kind of add like another bit of detail or motion on top of things. Andre Flat, thank you for the 13 months, a little over a year, buddy. Thank you. So yeah, this is really useful technique, similar to doing like volume displacement. You can take something that's somewhat smooth and add nice kind of controllable detail there. So I think this is contributing a little bit to the detail and shadowing and stuff that you see there. So this one, displace particles by curl noise. And because everything's hooked in to use these attributes, it has the feel of you're advecting, or that motion is like the detail is embedded in the motion, so that does a super good job or whatever. It's not like swimming through the noise pattern or anything like that. Hola, boa tarde. So this is pretty cool. You can do maybe a quick, if we, let me see here, this is frame 80. Go back to frame 80. And then this retime's happening down here. So I'll do one, save this frame, and do one render with the displacement, the post-simulation enhancement turned off. We can compare the differences between those two. So you see it here compared to there. So you can dial in more of those jagged edges and stuff like that, and you can control everything a bit better here with the noise. I just found this pretty nice if you want more, less fuzziness. You can reduce the roughness here, and let me get rid of this. That will start to make things a little bit crisper or whatever. So I was trying to get away from these large strands and just get some more broad shapes. Can start walking it closer to that. And I was just doing that predominantly to try to get closer to the reference. So I dialed this in a little bit. I wanted to keep some of the detail, but not lose like the gaseous look or whatever. So yeah, I think going up to 0.763 was where I ended up at, and that definitely helped. I don't know. The motion and stuff just feels softer, like the end result or something. Just break up some of those big kind of spaghetti lines or whatever like that. So yeah, displacing things using this procedural curl noise, really useful way to tweak the look after a simulation, and just use it a little bit. If you kind of rely on it too much, the motion might not feel supernatural, but definitely useful to know about. Pastel de nata, I don't think I've tried it. I'm into the salam de chocolate. These things here. I think the pastel de nata is too creamy for me. It's too. I'm not a big fan of the custard stuff, but these things with a coffee, it's pretty good. It's like a big Kit Kat bar or something like that. But yeah, it's meant to look like a. Yeah. That's. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of hidden, but yeah, definitely this is my favorite thing so far. Joao VFX, good to see you. Thank you for the 22 months. It's almost 2 years. I appreciate it. Frank Tashina, they were cracking out some pretty wild stuff near Easter. The bread with the raw baked bread with eggs inside of it. Paglia Italiana. I don't know if I've seen that before. What do we have here? Oh yeah, that looks pretty similar. Yeah, I think these are a similar idea. I find this just hilarious because they actually rope it up like a real salami and everything. Yeah, I could try to take a look at this in a little bit if we have time after the stream here. Oof. Instagram is just killing themselves. I don't know. I feel like it's going to turn into Vimeo, where it's just like horrifically hard to navigate and nobody's using it anymore. Oof. All right, let me try this one more time. Yeah, we could take a look at this maybe at the end if we have time. I remember seeing this one before. All right, so we'll get back to it. This one here, this is culling a percentage of the points, or it's grouping a percentage to delete. And this is what's being used to eventually grab like the sparkly bits. I think I actually ended up doing this twice. So this is grabbing a group to delete, and then this is just keeping everything except the ones that are in that group to delete. So let's just say group to delete. And then I don't know if it's a big deal, it's kind of makes things harder to see here, but under the bindings tab, you can turn on output selection group, and it will highlight your selection in the viewport. So if you're just getting a small portion of them, you could like visually see which points or whatever, but it's kind of when you have so many particles, it doesn't help that much. And then this was another little trick that I kind of added. So just putting a twist deformer on the particles, and the capture direction or whatever is set to Y. So basically just as these move through space, it's adding another spin to them. This technique isn't as flexible as like these ones here. You can generally use them in most simulations, but this technique here, you can really only do it if you're simming along a axis or along a direction. Maybe if you're simulating along a curve, you can do a path deform with a twist in that. It's a bit more difficult to set up, but you can feed your particle simulation in, and then your like guide curve for the particles, and you could do some post simulation scaling and twisting and stuff like that. But yeah, with this one, I just thought that this gave it more interesting look and shape. Yeah, the path deform is really cool. Before they had that, you had to like make your own in Houdini, and some people made some that were pretty good, but none of them were like absolutely outstanding. But the way they made that path deformer was definitely really good. So I'll do another render here, and this is without the twist deformer. So you can see it's just more of a, I mean, this is somewhat closer to the reference, I think, but I just thought that adding the more spiral motion to everything makes it pretty cool. Yeah, I think I was doing it with the PC open stuff in VOPs as well, but would get pretty slow. You'd have to just like do tons of math, and it was just a lot of VOP nodes and stuff like that. It was definitely not fun to have to keep like working with all the time. So just say twist, deform, spiral. And then this one here, we're doing another group to delete. So all of these ones are pretty much doing the same code. I'm just going to name them the same, and we'll say split by delete group. This one, this is doing the same thing. This one's doing the same thing. This attribute VOP, I was coloring it again down there, but I didn't end up using that. So just keep organizing things. We'll just do it like this. So this is the main particle. And then this one down here is the sparkles particle, the flakes. We'll just do that. So yeah, we're just deleting 10%. Sometimes maybe this selection set gets in the way. Let's turn that off. So you can see it's just thinning them out a little bit. I was playing around with that control as I was doing like look dev or playing around with things. And it definitely changes the look quite a bit, because you'll see it will like reveal more sparkles behind it, or if you really crank this up, you'll start to see more negative space and reveal more of the background. But I ended up not doing too much of that, just because it looked cool, but it definitely got too far away from the overall look or whatever. So it turns into more of like a energy kind of magical vortex or something like that. You do get more negative space, but yeah, again, it just was getting too far from the final target or whatever. And then this one down here, I'm just deleting the extra attributes that I don't need. So the age and the rest we were using up here for our procedural displacements and color. We don't need to use them anymore, so it's just clean extra attributes. So yeah, that's definitely rendering on a GPU or just in general. any data you can strip off. We look at here, the memory is 158 megabytes. If I bypass that, we're up to 264 megabytes. So there's middle mouse button, clicking on the nodes. You can get a quick detailed look at what's going on, but basically the rest is like a copy of the position. So it's almost like doubling your memory footprint, or like doubling the amount of particles you have almost, because it's storing two different copies of positions, and it can be quite heavy. So that's it for the main stream here. And then just going down here, of course, we're doing these delete groups. I don't think we really need that, so we'll just get rid of it. I haven't really used the pack points. Asking, do you ever use the pack points to cache out huge particle sims? I think with flip, doing massive flip simulations like a waterfall or something like that, it can be helpful, especially when you're like just working on surfacing certain areas. But just quicker, or like, I don't know, more like standard effects like this, I think it might be a little too much like overhead to, I don't know, delve into that territory. But for sure with certain types of effects, like white water or anything like that, I think it can definitely be helpful. There's pretty cool example videos and stuff from side effects where they have the guy with the hammer hitting the water or something with it. Yeah, the disk space is nice, but I think tweak, it might be slower, but for certain things it's definitely faster. Like if you're caching this way, loading each frame can take, maybe go into a later frame. Forgot what I simulated up to here. So go into a later frame. This is already taking a couple of seconds to load in 12 million points. And then if you want to surface them, it's even slower. But if you can spatially crop like a portion, dial in your fluid surface settings and things like that, and then like expand it back to the whole region, that's one of the advantages I find with the pack points that can be helpful. But yeah, there's VDB points, things that you can use as well for caching super big particle simulations. If you go to the OpenVDB website, I think the DNEG presentation talks a little bit about that. Let's just go to documentation, particle storage. So yeah, if you look at this, they talk about it. You can do a similar idea to kind of compress particles into VDB tiles. And they're using it for really heavy, like white water, which is fluid simulations. But again, it's something that adds a lot of like complexity to your scene to work with. And then this project here, like I knew I was really not going to need too many particles because it's never like a super wispy, like these ones here, they're going pretty wild with it. There's like 1 billion particles. I knew I didn't need that many, so I could kind of brute force it, and my scene was a little bit simpler that way. It's just less things you're managing or whatever. But definitely for feature film stuff or things where you need tons and tons of particles, looking into this VDB points and the pack points can be pretty worthwhile. So yeah, just stripping things back here now for the flakes. So we're just doing like 200,000 particles and then getting a random orientation here. So this just gives you the orient quaternion. This one here, we're spinning the rotation over time. And if you want to kind of experiment with this stuff, a good way, you just make a copy of these, and we'll put down a grid. And then with the grid, you can just set it to points. So anytime I'm experimenting, I think we did the same thing down here. Last time someone was asking about visualizing these distributions. Just to visualize things, creating a small data set to test with, just like a grid of points. We can use this copy to points down here and pop it like that. And then I can play back. So in real time here, I can kind of see what my rotations are doing, if they're, make sure they're not doing anything too funky or too jarring, and just visualize the speed. So basically this one here, you just give it random starting rotation or random rotation frame or whatever. And then this one here, using matrices, I was just doing basically sample sphere uniform that we visualized here. This gives you just a random position on a sphere or a 3D circle or whatever. And then we're just slurping, or like moving towards that direction. And the slurp, you kind of do what I'm doing here, which is like breaking it or abusing it. So basically just cranking the value beyond 1, and you'll just continue like rotating in that general direction, if that makes sense. I think I ran into I was trying to do it some other ways and made some mistakes last stream, but this way seemed controllable enough to get me by or whatever. So yeah, we're just going from the start rotation to this random rotation or orientation. And then we're using time, and we're doing it randomly based on each point number. So random speed between 1.1 and 1.25. So basically 10% or 125% of the final speed. You can do ramps to re-ramp the distribution if you want. But if I just set this here to 0.1 and 0.1, everything's kind of moving at the same speed. So I do anywhere between 10% and 125%, and you get some that are spinning fast and some that are spinning slow. Yeah, the MOPS nodes are cool. I don't like to add a ton of extra like dependencies. So like if I'm really used to using MOPS, and then I'm contracting for a facility that doesn't support or doesn't have MOPS installed, to use their render farm, you either have to like ask them to install them all, or like can add a little bit of the extra headache. So I'll try not to use them. Quaternions can be a headache, but like this, being able to use this slurp stuff is pretty powerful, and matrices as well are pretty complex. But things right here, it's a pretty simple operation happening once you kind of break it, visualize it, or think about it. Like getting into editing certain components of a quaternion can be pretty painful and like not fun at all. But it's definitely a pretty useful skill, especially for effects. Pretty powerful. Yeah, you can bake IFDs. I mean, depends how you're working. If you're working remotely, sometimes then uploading tons of like information, like I don't know, I prefer to reduce the complexity of my scenes as much as possible in terms of like dependencies or things like that. So I don't know, I did spend a lot of time learning this type of stuff, so just if I can get by with it pretty quickly, I'll try to do that. So we'll go back here, and this is rotate. We'll call it maybe spin the orientation over time. And then lastly, here is just a random p-scale distribution. So randomize p-scale. Yeah, and then this attribute randomize node, super nice. This stuff I used to do it with Vex by hand, like all the time, and it would be pretty messy. But these common UI or whatever to have everyone using the same UI and parameters is super nice now. You get really good control here. So I'm basically saying everything should be 0.75, and then between, this is going to be the absolute minimum is 0.25, and then just using this ramp, random positions on this ramp will be the values. Yeah, the attribute adjust float is pretty nice. Some of them I like better than others, but definitely all of these new ones that they've attribute remap is a pretty nice one. They're all pretty good. The one thing I didn't like that much is like their new mountain node. They got rid of the, oh, I guess they still have it. But some of it, this alligator noise is really nice to know about. But yeah, I feel like putting it to simplex noise by default is a little unfortunate. This alligator noise gives you really nice kind of rocky popcorn type shapes, but the default simplex is like, I don't know, definitely a little less interesting, I think. So yeah, that was one thing that I think the drawback with the alligator is that they don't have a fourth component for it or whatever, so you can't animate it over time. All right, so that's pretty much it. Yeah, and then just down here, this default axis, you can pull it in. Basically, it exists in the HFS. This is a Houdini file system or your Houdini install directory. So inside of this geo, there's the default axis. You can also use default geo. That's like the box that you get when you put down a file node or whatever that has the X, Y, and Z on it or whatever. But yeah, the default axis, it's a good way just to visualize orientations and everything like that if you want. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the network here. And simulation, I didn't change at all. It's the same cache from the first stream. So we basically just have the main particles and the flake particles. I think the last thing to go over with might just be up here on the object level with visibility. This is the stuff I was talking about earlier. So turning off so the particles don't show up in the flake reflections. We don't want these to cast any reflection or refraction, rendering them as particles, of course. And down here on the flake object, this one I was turning all that stuff off to optimize the render time and just to remove like extra jitteriness or flickery bits or stuff like that. So it's definitely a pretty useful technique if you're doing very like stylized, non-photoreal look. Like these flakes here, there's no reason to have them reflecting other objects or anything like that. You're never gonna get anything good out of doing it, basically. Even if it is like super fast to do, it still might be like extra distracting, or it's just gonna look super like an artifact or like super distracting or whatever. So turning off that definitely was something useful that I figured out and decided to do. So yeah, that's pretty much it. We could do a scene share. If you guys have any questions that you don't think I went over, feel free to put them in the chat. This should be the file right here. You should be able to, you just need to cache the simulation. That's pretty much it. and then you should be able to hit render and you should get something that looks very similar to this. Duck Fac, yes, please go for it. Joao, thank you, yes. So yeah, while people are putting in the question or anything like that, I can see if I can put together a quick Agua de Pedras. I could try to put together a quick. This is pretty good. I don't know. The Pedras is pretty good. Can you quickly do a Karma frame render? None of this stuff is set up in Karma. It's gonna look super different. So with Karma, the lights are all gonna be different. It's gonna be a pretty good amount of work to recreate it. If you guys want to play around with Karma, feel free, but I'm not, I don't think it's going to be that helpful to try to recreate it or put it back together right now. Setting up your post effects in render view translates to the mplay simulation render. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by mplay simulation render. If you go to the Redshift ROP, under here, post effects, I turn these checkboxes on. And then if you do render to mplay, you want to do the display gamma to 1 to make sure you're getting the same ASIS look between the two of them. I think with Karma, it's a little bit more difficult to set up ASIS as well, which is why I'm not as, it just is more difficult to do live streams, and then you're setting like environment variables, and then people don't have the same look on their side or whatever. That's what I've been looking for, thank you. Yeah, so if you want the look to match, I think those are the 3 things, is basically turn the mplay display gamma to 1 if you're going to be using that mplay buffer or whatever, and then down here you just check all the boxes. So you just have to do these extra 2 boxes. So yeah, that's the mplay stuff. In the case of the depth of field for the particle, get a better result in Nuke. ZPass. Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, there's some pretty good plugins you can use in Nuke. It's definitely just another step, another cost. The Nuke licenses are pretty expensive, and it's another step to put in. One thing I would try before going to Nuke is here using a custom bokeh image. You can find some online that can give you better looks and stuff like that. But I think there was like, yeah, this one is pretty good, Pre-Grind Labs. But yeah, using Z depth with particles or like deep EXRs and all that stuff, it definitely just elongates your project timeline. So like if you're working at a studio and you have a compositor, like a lot of people working on it, it can be super helpful, but I was kind of just going quick and dirty here. Like even my render settings here are kind of bad. There's a good amount of sampling errors and things like that. Yeah, you can use the filter, the Z to focus and things like that. I mean, you can definitely get good looks and you have more flexibility for sure, but I just wasn't super concerned with it. And again, yeah, that you have to worry a little bit about the depth pass, and you can get like sampling or like aliasing errors, and like it can require a bit more troubleshooting and things like that. So I don't know, for me, just trying to get this done in the quickest amount of time possible. But you can adjust this aspect ratio and things like that can be helpful. I was playing around as well with the bladed shutter at some point. But I was just trying to get close to this look. I think some of these might be a little bit better than what I ended up with just, you could get this with a custom bokeh image. I don't know if I... I think I had some somewhere that I was using. I don't remember if they were in here. Ah, here it is. Maybe this one? Oh. This one? Thank you. Yeah, I saw it after. I thought it was like alphabetical and stuff. It was throwing me off. So this is kind of maybe similar to matching that kind of shape. Boom, boom. So yeah, I just download it. Can put it in here. Go to my downloads. Grab it. You can play around with this. This is basically like converting RGB to things. Let's see, we have everything turned back on now. I might want to go to a later frame for this. Maybe we don't have everything turned back on. Something here changed. Might need to revert. Yeah, I think the RTX acceleration is turned on. Might be this bokeh image. Maybe I do need to do the normalization. Let me just see if this looks normal at first. Yeah, I don't know if it. I'm looking through these and I think the. So yeah, this is looking like I expect. Yeah, I'm not. Sometimes I've had pretty good results with the RTX acceleration, but overall I haven't noticed like super consistent things. So I think maybe I do want to do one of these. Otherwise, it was like darkening my image. It's possible I wanted to crop into it. Yeah, it just depends how this, no, that one right there wasn't with the bokeh. This is with it right now. But yeah, I think just doing the image normalization threw it off a little bit. But yeah, this is maybe boosting the already like aspect ratio kind of thing. So I think if you're using one that has that built into it, you probably want to go back to something closer to 1. But yeah, it's just something to also play around with. You can use the power function here and you should get a little bit more like contrast, or you might start to see the center of that getting maybe a little bit dimmer. But yeah, there's other ones you can use. But it's depending on your situation, might be helpful. Let me just see if there's something else in here that was. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely if you're looking for really good, yeah, the RTX acceleration de-accelerates my FPS. So depending on if you're really bokeh aficionado, using plugins and doing it in post can be useful, but for streaming or just for quick projects and quick examples, I just try to keep everything inside of Houdini. So yeah, you can use an image like that, but just tweaking it, I usually go reduce the aspect to try to get like the anamorphic look. You can play around with that stuff, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, so things like volumes or particles, doing depth of field, that was what I was talking a little bit about earlier, like you run into pixel aliasing or like depth sampling, like there's a lot of little things that can introduce more artifacts, or like just hang your project up. Like you can spend a week trying to fix that one issue with like some depth pass artifacts or something like that. Working this way is nice because you can just, it's going to look the way it looks, and you don't have to worry about messing around with too much stuff. And also Redshift being GPU, it's like somewhat you get the bokeh or the bokeh stuff for free close to it. Like it doesn't add too much extra render time. Yeah, these images, you can search for them. I think people have put collections or stuff like that up. But yeah, just doing a Google image search for like the bokeh images, you can usually find a few. You can crop them yourself from a photograph. Doesn't need to be super high resolution or anything like that. It's just basically using like the overall shape, and then you can get some of the chromatic fringing or things like that can be cool. We can put this one in and see what happens. Maybe we try unit intensity here. Yeah, and then we could just wrap up here. Maybe I'll just talk about the camera stuff. So should see that shape showing up. Maybe do. All right, we got him. All right. So yeah, you can get some good looks using these. I was just trying to get something similar to here. I think some of these might even be sprites or like 2D things that they added. I think if you look, I don't know, like some of these that are getting like rotations or something seem a little bit like it might be a 2D effect or post-production thing or something like that. But yeah, you can definitely get good results as well trying out your own bokeh images and putting them in. You could just render out this small cropped portion at 8K and print it out, put it on your wall, and you have a nice abstract art gallery yourself or something like that. But yeah, we'll just wrap up now and go through these camera expressions that I was doing here. So focus distance, I just tied that. We could turn this other stuff off for a second. Get the frustum view back. All right. So yeah, the focus distance, I just offset that from the height of the camera. So basically that fixes the focal plane to always be close to the origin here. You can use other expressions if you want. I think sometimes people use the V2 origin and V length along with a null node. And you can use like your null as a target for your focal plane. In this case, I could just use the TY. So basically, however high up the camera is, it will use just a slightly offset value to fix the focal plane here in height. And then the other ones was just doing these rotations and translations, I'm just doing $FF, just super simple expressions, basically a constant speed over the duration of the shot. So here, this is translate reviewing. Over time, this is just the pullback, or pull in, I guess. So just reducing ty over time. Just the fit function to remap. And here, this is the rotate. So again, just over time, it's kind of subtle rotation. And then the last one is this focal length that's somewhat more like special expression. But you basically use this, I think I found it on a Wikipedia article entry or something like that. And can pop open a new file and try to drop it in pretty quick. But basically this is using that absolute value of ty, the translate y, or like the distance. And the atan function is going to give you a special relationship between the two to keep basically the object at the same visual distance as everything. So just see if we can quickly put that in and see what's going on. So if I just do a camera, we'll do a similar offset or a similar setup here. So we'll make it looking down the y axis like that. I can make a circle. It's going to be what we're looking at. So this is going to be the object we want to keep like in focus somewhat. And we'll just make a lattice, like a grid of particles. So you can do the box and then the points from volume. Bing, 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 bing. So we kind of have this happening. Maybe the tetrahedral is more interesting. So this just gives us like spatially another reference point or something we're looking at. And then we'll do our camera here, and I'm going to put in aperture. I usually set that at 36. It was like a standard sensor size. And we can use this same expression here. You might have to play around with different arguments or things like that. And then basically here this should give you a similar result. So you can see it's just stretching the other points, but it's not really changing the visual appearance of that circle. I think I might want to play around with this value. Let's try this. So you can kind of do the dolly zoom this way. Yeah, you just basically want the background and foreground to elongate or compress, but the things that are on the focal plane, like your target object, to stay the same visual size, and then that gives you the dramatic Hitchcock effect or whatever. So we can put some spheres on here quickly. Bing, bing, bing. There's some kind of sacred geometry or something like that. And maybe instead of the circle, we'll do one of our favorite fellas. We need to shift him around a little bit. Do something like this. Put him right there. Whoops. Oops. All right. Let's All right. So if we just set this up here, basically this is our character, and then this is just extra stuff. So if we move the camera around, we can kind of get that feeling like all of the background and foreground is pulling or stretching, but he's staying the same distance. So if you want to do tighter framing or whatever, you can play around with these two arguments and get different effects, and then play around with the things here. And if you really want him to actually stay exactly the same, like you need to make sure it's exactly at the origin. So even things that are slightly offset or whatever would appear a little bit different. So like in this case, dropping him down so his nose is right on the plane there. And then going back into the camera, when you start to get really like extreme values, that will be like what you're pulling in or pulling back on. Yeah, Hitchcock zoom, vertigo, fun house. So yeah, the camera's super close, but then the FOV is just so wide that it really distorts everything like that. All right, so yeah, this, I'll just save it here. The streaming folder, we'll do .524. So it'll be the camera setup, pitch, cock, zoom, dolly zoom, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, you can take a look at it there as well if you want to play around with it. Like I said, the expressions, this is just something I found on like a Wikipedia entry, but basically compensating for the aspect ratio, so resolution X divided by resolution Y, and then absolute value kind of keeps things safe, but the distance. So the distance from the desired like target that you want to keep in frame, compensated by the aspect ratio, and then this ATAN2, and you want to play around with these other arguments depending on the amount of control and flexibility and things like that that you want to add to everything. So yeah, that's going to be it for everything today, I think.